Hello and welcome. We're just going to let everyone get logged in as we start our afternoon about fire preparedness. Welcome, welcome. Just letting everyone get signed in. Hello and welcome. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. Okay, 1 more minute. See if anyone else hops on. Okay, well, hello and welcome. My name is Emily Hegarty. I am the program director here at the Napa Valley Grapegrowers and the Napa Valley Farmworker Foundation. And welcome to our afternoon event on fire prevention and protection. First, I'd like to take a moment to recognize all of our annual sponsors that you see here on the screen. Their support of our mission, their investment in our agricultural community, and partnership with us is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much to all of them. Before we get started, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping slides. Pretty simple. I think you guys will do just fine. First, all attendees are muted, and after the presentation, we'll have a dedicated time for questions. So you are welcome to submit questions through that Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your screen at any time. Additionally, we ask that you please stay on till the end, if you can, to fill out a quick 3-question poll. We always want your feedback, A, but B, it allows us to maintain our grant funding to continue to provide wonderful events like these to you. So please do that. And if you're listening today, don't worry, don't get your notepads, don't get a hand cramp writing down things. We will be providing the recording of this with via email next week. Additionally, we also are restructuring our wildfire section of our website, of the NVG website. And with that, we'll have updated information, which will include a fire prevention protocols for vineyard properties, which is currently being developed by our wildfire task force. So you will receive more information in the coming weeks on that. So I'm not going to keep chatting. I will let Eric take it from here. I'm excited to welcome him today. Eric Hernandez is the Code Compliance Officer from the Fire Marshal's Office in Napa County. Eric acts as the first line of defense against fires by ensuring buildings are carefully constructed and prepared with functional safety equipment. So Eric, thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for the time that you've taken to not only speak today, but speak to our Spanish crews last week for 2 days. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I'll let you take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Emily. And I want to say thank you for everybody to taking the time to joining us today. Obviously, the talks about defensible space and fire mitigation programs. It's not something that, while back in the day, typically fire season was considered between June 1st and the end of October. It seems like now more and more we want to make sure that we're talking about this and preparing our structures, our infrastructure, and also our community members by providing the right tools and education so that we can be ready at any given point for not just for wildfires, but also structure fires and any type of emergency. So today I have a couple things that I've prepared for today. I hope that some of it might be repetitive to other things that you've heard in the past, but there's a reason why, again, there's a reason why we're pushing hard on the defensible space and the projects that and the information that we're handing out to our community members. So further ado, I'm going to start with my presentation. And just want to make sure, Emily, can you see my PowerPoint?
It looks amazing.
Okay, perfect. All right. So let's start off with a couple of things. We're Cal Fire and Napa County Fire, which basically means that Napa County has, for those of you that are not familiar, Cal Fire has a contract with Napa County to provide fire prevention and suppression services for the county of Napa. And under that, that umbrella, we have the Fire Marshal's Office, which essentially we do plan review. We do construction inspections to ensure that all new construction meets NFPA and also fire code standards and codes. So let's start with this one then. So today we're going to be talking about natural disaster preparedness, defensible space, and maintaining commercial properties in compliance with fire code and NFPA standards. The objective of today is going to be about to ensure the life and safety of community members, employees, pets, and preserve structures and infrastructures. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about preparing. Obviously, everybody should be familiar with Nixle and Nixle alerts and Zone Haven. For those of you that are not familiar with Nixle, it's basically it's not an app. It's basically a text messaging platform where you could receive notifications of any information that might affect you or certain areas of the county. To sign up, you can send a text message to 888-777, and in the message box, you're going to include the area code where you reside or where you have the business. And then it'll automatically sign you up. You're not subjected to just one. You could send different zip codes and you can receive messages and any alerts for that. In addition to that, the Sheriff's Office recently came out with Zone Haven. For those of you that are not familiar, it's basically something similar to what Sonoma has done in the past. So every property, every piece of land in the county of Napa has been assigned a zone number. So the easiest way to learn your zone is you can actually go to the Sheriff's Office website, and it actually gives you a tool where you can sign up for that. So let me see if I could share my screen really quick, so we can navigate through that and we can do it together. Can you see my new screen, Emily?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to www.countyofnapa.org, and then under departments, you're going to come down to and click on the right-hand side under Sheriff, which is now going to take you to the Sheriff's website. So as you scroll down, it should give you a button or an icon where you can click where it says, let's see here. Maybe they just changed it, but let's see here. Let me see if I can do it this way. So it seems like they just changed it for some reason, but I'll work it out with them. But essentially, you should be able to go onto the Sheriff's page right here, and there should be an icon where it basically says know your zone. Let me see if it's down here. Follow us. Nope. So I'll work with them on that. But there should be one of these that should say know your zone. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. Perfect. All right.
Looks good.
All right, perfect. All right, and then the other thing that I wanted to mention is the Sheriff's Office is responsible for carrying out the evacuation orders. So if you're in an area or in a zone that is under mandatory evacuations, make sure you check the NICS alerts, but also feel free to stop by to any of the police stations or sheriff station or office, and they have these tags that are up here above this map. And so what you're able to do is during an emergency or during an evacuation orders, the idea is for you to, as you're exiting, put those out so that law enforcement knows that nobody's in the building. Okay, so let's go to my next slide. So let's talk about same thing about preparedness. One of the things that we always look for anytime we arrive to a property, whether it be under inspection, construction inspection, defensible space, or anytime we go to any property, we're looking at addressing and access. So we want to make sure that people have the right addressing size and proper signage. It's going to help us in the long run. Now, keep in mind, during a wildland incident where we have mutual aid coming in from different areas of the state and the country, some of these strike teams that are coming in might not be familiar with your property. So this is where this comes into play. And I'll get a little bit more into it when down the presentation. But at the very least, the minimum requirements are a proper addressing. So the difference between addressing for residential and commercial is residential, it's a minimum of 4 inches each number in contrast, and it has to be facing both sides of the road, of the street. Give me 1 second. Perfect. Thank you, Dave, for the link. If for those of you, Dave Moffitt provided the link where you can check your zone. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay, and then let's go back here. So one of the things that's going to help us a lot also is some of these areas in the county are out in the remote areas. So you might have a 500-acre property, and we need to know what exactly is out there. So whether it be resources or additional homes, some of these have both. Some of these have commercial and residential. So any sort of signage that you can provide to us, the idea, and this is not a requirement unless we require you to do so during an inspection, but let's start thinking ahead. We want to know what kind of resources you have. So if you have water tanks, if you have wet drafts, for those of you that don't know what a wet draft is basically a hydrant that's not pressurized. Typically, you'll find those in a residential application, not necessarily in a commercial application. But if you happen to have one of those, make sure that clearly visible, it's identified. Let us know how much water is in there. And again, it doesn't have to be pressurized because we'll draft out of there. Lots of times we're finding that when we're doing inspections, we're finding hydrants and wet drafts are covered with vegetation, so it makes it difficult for us to know what kind of resources you have. In addition to that, commercial properties are required to have a Knox cabinet. So we call it a document box. Document box basically is a box that has information that is going to assist us when arriving to any type of emergency, whether it be a medical call or a wildland or a structure fire. So for instance, typically inside of the box, we'll have a site plan of the property where all the structures are identified. In addition to that, all the utilities, gas, propane, fire pumps, any electrical, everything is detailed on this site plan. The SDS sheets, it used to be MSDS, now it's SDS. So any information pertaining to that, and also it's important for us to have keys to the buildings if it's a commercial application. So if it's a single family dwelling, you wouldn't be required to have one of these Knox cabinets, but if you're in a commercial building, you would. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So a couple of things about the water storage tanks and connections. And the reason why I'm bringing this one up is, oftentimes we see a lot of water storage tanks, and sometimes I'm talking to vineyard managers, management and property owners, and they tell me ahead of time that they have a water storage tank. Maybe it's 20,000 gallons, maybe it's 5,000 gallons. And so that's good. That's good. And the reason why they tell me this is so that in their mind, they're thinking that, okay, this is something that during a fire we can tap into and we can use to suppress or put out a fire or for structure protection. Now, while this is important, one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up is we're finding that sometimes the proper connections are not attached to the actual system. So there is a proper connection that is required. It's a national host thread, and we do have a detail of that in our fire marshal's website, where you could find the proper connections, and you could find them at Central Valley, and then also at Wyatt and Pay Supply. So unless you have the proper connections, we unfortunately won't be able to tap into these. So just, you know, if your mindset is that you want to install these water tanks with a 4-inch underground connection so that we can use it during any type of fire or emergency, feel free to give us a call. We want to make sure that if you're going to spend the money on installing these out in the rural areas, we want to make sure that you have the proper fittings so that during an event, we're able to use them, okay? And we've actually had, the reason why I'm bringing this up is we've had instances where the outlets are PVC and it's not something that we're gonna be able to connect to. So it's always a question, if we knew or if the property owner would have installed the right fittings, it would have been a different ballgame, right? A different outcome. So feel free to give us a call. Phone number 707 299-1464, and I'll write it above before I forget. So a couple of things with these storage tanks, they could be underground, they could be above ground. With the wet drafts, again, they don't have to be pressurized. That's the reason why I'm showing this this picture here. So the reason why it's called the wet draft is because we're going to draft out of there. So we're going to use our engines to, you know, obviously given that we have the right connections, we're going to draft the water out, and we're going to use our pumper to basically supply the demand for the system itself. Okay, and so now we're going to get into the hard part, or the meat of what I do, which is a defensible space. I prepared this video. Many of you have probably seen it, but this is something that I worked in conjunction with an HOA community, also with Hugh Davies from Stromsburg, and also with Adventist Health St. Helena Hospital. So let me play it really quick.
Scott Salmon, the Director of Facility Services for St. Helena Hospital. I'm sure the weed abatement helped tremendously this year. We did more than ever this year. And to be honest, when I returned 2 days after the fire swept through the community, I was expecting all of our residential neighborhood to be completely gone. But we lost only 5 homes. We saved about 65 or 70 of them. I recommend that everybody weed abate, cut back your shrubs and your trees. Get a hold of the fire marshal. You need direction or advice.
My name is Patty Sanchez-Moore. I'm the president of the Meadowood Homeowners Association. Our community decided to reach out to CAL FIRE and Napa County Fire to come and visit our community and give us some advice on how we can make more fires safe. Our community did a lot of work to clear the areas around the homes. A lot of homeowners did clearing of weeds, as we had been suggested to us. And we think it had a significant impact on keeping our community safe.
Hi, my name is Hugh Davies. I'm the president and proprietor here at Schramsburg Vineyards. Reached out to different people. Jason Downs has visited with us, other members of his team, and we have reviewed the property carefully. You know, what steps might we take to harden our property, make it more likely to survive a fire event. And we're really thankful that we did. So our buildings, they're all there. Honestly, hardly touched. So I would highly encourage that people reach out to the firefighters. We survived a pretty difficult challenge, and I don't think that would have happened without their help.
All right, so I'll stop there. So a couple things that I will mention. You know, I put this video together, and I remember that, you know, in years past, I've been doing this for about 7 years, working for a fire department and, you know, doing on the prevention side. But this year, I find that a lot of people have been reaching out to us, and I think that it has a lot to do with this video. A lot of people are trying to get ahead of you know, the fire season, and which, again, in my point of view, it's all year round. It's not necessarily June 1st or to the end of October. We found that we're finding that a lot of people have reached out to us in the last months. So ideally, the months of December through March, we've done a lot of what I like to call consulting inspections, where whether it be a commercial property or residential property, or even barns, a lot of people have been reaching out to us and asking us if we could actually come out and do a walkthrough of their properties and basically outline different projects that can be done. Now, we do have a defensible space ordinance and guidelines, so we have requirements, but in addition to that, we also have recommendations. And that's something that we always touch on. While we understand that, and I can't sit here and ensure that defensible space will 100% make sure that your property is going to survive a wildland fire, it's definitely going to make a big difference in many different ways. But I'm finding a lot of people have reached out to us. So we appreciate that, and we hope that yourself as property owners or property managers, you're able to reach out to us as well and get ahead of it so that we can give you a list of different projects that you can work on for two reasons. One, so that you can be prepared, and two, so that if ever we do happen to do a defensible space inspection, you don't have to worry about receiving a notice or a citation from me stating that your property is not compliant with our defensible space ordinance or guideline. So let me move to the next one. So let's talk about defensible space. What is defensible space? So earlier I mentioned that Napa County and CAL FIRE contract, right, for prevention services, both prevention and suppression. So a couple things that I find is there's always a question about what's the difference between the requirements in CAL FIRE and what should we be following as property owners in Napa County. So just to make sure and everybody's clear on this, if you live in the county of Napa and in the unincorporated areas of the county, you're subject to Napa County's defensible space ordinance and requirements. And I'll get into that in a second. Now, in addition to that, Napa City, City of St. Helena, and Calistoga, town of Calistoga, and also American Canyon, town of American Canyon, they have their own jurisdiction. So they have their own defensible space inspectors. So if you happen to reside or have a business in those areas, feel free to reach out to them, as I would not have any jurisdiction over this. Okay. So why is defensible space required in Napa County? Again, these are questions that I'll be answering shortly. What are defensible space requirements in Napa County? And what is our process? What if a property owner chooses not to abide by defensible space guidelines? So I'll touch on that. And then obviously we started doing inspections. This year was April 1st. So what is defensible space? Again, defensible space in Napa County is that all structures shall have a minimum, and again, all structures, that includes residential and commercial, all structures are required to have a minimum. And again, the reason why I say a minimum is it depends on the topography. So for instance, if you're in flat ground, flat land, and your structure, you don't have any hills, or you're not in an uphill or downhill, your defensible space is going to be 100 feet of perimeter around your structure, all structures on the property. Now, if you're on a hillside or downhill, than in the sloped area, then your defensible space is going to increase. The reason for that is obviously we understand with, you know, with the wind conditions, also with the amount of fuel, we understand that fire is going to travel much faster in that situation opposed to flat land. So again, it all depends on the layout of your property. We always look at the topography. So if you have questions about your property, feel free to call me directly. Again, I'll put my phone number in here right now before I forget. Let's see here. Let me see if I can do that. Okay, I'll send it later, but I'll make sure I provide it. So the way that I like to do it is in 3 zones and in 3 phases. So zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. So zone 1 is the immediate vicinity of the structure and 5 feet out. So basically what I'm looking for is what's near your structure. Okay, so if you have your gutters, roof, we want to make sure that you have no vegetation, no pine needles, no dead leaves stacked and on your roof or on your gutters, or I'm sorry, inside your gutters. In addition to that, we want to make sure that you have a vertical clearance of no less than 10 feet from any chimney outlets or any stovepipes. So we want to make sure that you have the proper screens. So when we talked about vertical clearance, that means that any low-hanging branches that are too close to the stovepipes, you want to make sure, and we're going to require you to cut them back so that as we're always trying to protect structures, we want to protect vice versa. If we have a structure fire, we want to protect any tree or any vegetation to catch on fire that will potentially cause a wildland fire, right? So we look at your screens. We want to make sure that you have no vegetation, and something new is the pyrophytic plant species. So high flammable plants that can potentially cause be the make it or break it to during a wildland fire to your structure, right? All grasses shall be kept minimum 4 inches or less between the zone 2, which is 5 feet from the structure to 30 feet from the structure. So grasses shall be kept to minimum 4 inches or less. Any dead or dry vegetation shall be cut and removed from the property. That includes trees. Trees, branches, whether they're standing or whether they're on the ground. The other thing that we're looking for is zone 3 is same thing, grasses shall be cut and to 4 inches or less. Also, we want to remove the ladder fuels. So if you have trees that are green and live trees, healthy trees, we want to make sure that you have a separation of vertical clearance, of a minimum of 6 feet from the ground up. So any low hanging branches, we want to make sure that you're cutting those. So again, that's the requirement for a property that's flat. Now, if it's a property that is in a sloped area and possibly depending on the layout, we're going to increase this and we might increase it to 15 feet from the ground up. Again, we want to remove those ladder fuels. And then the other thing is we want to make sure that you're providing proper separation between tree canopies. So you look in this picture, there's some space between these tree canopies. And lots of times I'm finding as I'm doing these consulting inspections where people have me come out, everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people tend to just look down and worry about the shrubs, worry about the grasses, and worry about the vicinity of the structure. But lots of times I'm finding that I'm looking up and the structures are basically surrounded by oak trees, manzanitas, again, pyrophytic plant species, and there's no separation. So the reason why we're trying to educate the public a lot on the separation and on the tree thinning is because that reduces the radiant heat. So if your property, your structure is surrounded by trees and you don't have the proper separation of the tree canopies or the ladder fuels, what's going to happen is your radiant heat is going to be so high because now you have all the vegetation surrounding your structure is going to be on fire. So that's one of the things that we're looking for. The other thing that I'm finding is ivy. So while ivy might not be under that pyrophytic plant species, the problem that I'm finding is underneath the ivy, you have a lot of buildup. So typically you have people or landscapers, when they're using their blowers, maybe your driveway looks good, but the problem is unless you're really getting underneath the ivy or the jasmine, that's where all the buildup goes. So now you have a lot of dead and dry vegetation underneath there, which might be close to your structure. So that's another thing that we're finding as we're doing these inspections. Okay, so list of pyrophytic plant species. So pyrophytic, not a lot of people are familiar with this, and it actually took me a while for me to actually get the right terminology because I was new to it as well. But basically means fire-prone vegetation that is adapted to or that contributes to rapid burning. So in short term is highly combustible vegetation. So we have a list here now. Couple things. I know you're not going to remember this right now, so the entire list that's here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide Emily from Napa Valley Grapegrowers, and they'll have access to this list. In addition to that, we've worked with our local nurseries, and we've provided a copy of this list to them, so that the idea is if you're going to look for summer projects or the honeydew list, you come to the nursery. The idea is that they have that list available for you so that you know what kind of plants you should stay away from, okay? So this is, and the reason why I'm sharing this is a commercial property that, again, back in February, the maintenance manager reached out to me and asked me if I can come out and look at the property and kind of put together a list of projects. And this is exactly the result. This is a picture from earlier this week. And so, the recommendations and also the requirements that I put in writing to this property manager, they went above and beyond. I mean, this is just one side. So this is a way of how you properly can make your home defendable. So, you could see all the ladder fuels have been removed, all the trees have been limbed up, and there's a tree separation. So before I do have the before and after, but I just wanted to show, for lack of time, I wanted to show the end result. So this is exactly what we're looking for. Okay, and this is the other side, same thing. And then on the other side of the road, I actually have a video of this, but they went above and beyond. They went up to 300 feet away from all the structures, doing the thinning and doing a shaded fuel break, okay? And I'll get to shaded fuel break in a second. So what is a shaded fuel break? So again, we have the defensible space requirements and we have recommendations. So lots of times you might benefit from having a shaded fuel break. So what is a shaded fuel break? So basically is removing all ladder fuels. That's in addition to the ordinance. So this is something outside of the a minimum of 100-foot defensible space around the structure. So this is exactly what this property did. They went 300 feet out and they're going to continue doing more work next week. And so the way to do that is you're removing all the ladder fuels. So literally they cut all the low hanging branches to a minimum of 20 feet from the ground up. So 20 feet of vertical clearance, and then also horizontal clearance to all tree canopies. Well, our requirement is all tree canopies that are within the defensible space of a structure shall have a minimum of 10 feet of separation. They did a little bit more than that. So again, the whole purpose of this is if you do have a fire making its way towards a structure, you're reducing the intensity of the fire and reducing the heat, the radiant heat, by eliminating the fuel. Okay, I kind of like to look at it as Pac-Man. So the more yellow dots, that's the fuel. The more yellow dots that you can reduce, the less that the Mr. or Mrs. Pac-Man is going to make its way closer, right? That's kind of how I like to look at it. And then the road clearance, that's another big one. Road clearance, always look at your means of egress. You should be making sure that you can in an emergency, not only can you get out of the property and then to the public right of way, but also we can come onto the property. And the benefits, again, you reduce the radiant heat to buy time to safely evacuate all occupants, builds a line that first responder can work off of during a fire. So for instance, if you have a air tanker dropping retardant and you have a highly vegetated forest and near a property, that's not gonna, it's not gonna be as effective as if you had a shaded field break where you're going to have more retardant that's going to drop onto the actual ground, and it's going to give the hand crews an ability to actually come in and be able to start scraping and get down to the bare soil so that to create a separation or to contain a line away from the structure. And then again, higher probability that all occupants, structures, and infrastructure will survive a wildland fire. So we've done a lot of these, a lot of consulting work where we've identified these areas where you could benefit, your properties can benefit from a shaded field break. Again, the ideal time to do this is between December and March, so that once April 1st hits, comes along, your property is ready and you've done all the necessary work that was within your reach to protect your structures. So here's a couple pictures that I took, that are close to some structures. This is what we're talking about. So when we're talking about a shaded field break, even though this is not within the defensible space of a structure, by providing a shaded field break in this area, this is how you can, again, reduce the intensity of a fire, reduce the radiant heat, and slow the spread. So again, a shaded field break, you would come in, you would remove all the dead, dry vegetation, limb up all the trees, minimum 20 feet from the ground up, and also provide a separation. Okay, we see this is something that we see all the time in different areas. Okay, and this is the result here. So you go from this to this. This is going to be night and day. So again, while defensible space doesn't guarantee that your home or your structure will be saved, it does increase its chances of surviving, and it gives first responders an ability to actually defend it. So that's one of the things to consider as well. Okay. So does anybody have any questions so far? I just want to make sure that I answer any questions. If not, then what I'll do now is I will actually go to the second portion, which is going to be, let's see here, the life and safety aspect. So one of the things that we're finding is can you see my screen, Emily? I just want to make sure you can. Okay. Can you guys see my screen where it says Napa County Fire Department Life and Safety Inspection? Can someone type it in? Let's see here.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so the State Fire Marshal's Office requires that certain occupancies have to be inspected on an annual basis or biannual basis. And so wineries, tasting rooms, restaurants do not fall under this category because these are not required to be inspected unless you're in a R1, R2, which is a hotel, motel, or an apartment complex. And so the reason why I put this list together, and every time I visit a property, I provide this to management, is for several reasons. One of them is, you might have hydrants on your property. Unless they're properly being tested or maintained, how do we know, or how do you know that they work adequate to its capabilities? So for that, our mindset is that we're providing this to property managers and owners, and in case there's ever a fire or even a structure fire, your insurance company comes out and they want to see records of any all maintenance and inspection records for all your fire protection systems if you do have them installed on the properties. Okay, so the idea is taking this and creating a binder, and in that binder, you're gonna make different tabs and you're gonna put it as egress. We check all your doors, and I'll get into this in a second, but also you break it down to sprinkler system, fire alarm system, fire pump, and then kitchen pre-engineered suppression system, fire extinguishers. So they're all governed by California fire code. So that's something that we want to make sure you get into and you know what the requirements are. Again, for commercial signage for commercial properties, they should have a minimum of 6 inches and they shall be facing the both sides of the road. Industrial properties in the industrial area, you're looking at 12 inches each number. Okay. And then fire lanes. All fire lanes shall be painted and maintained red with words fire lane painted in white. So make sure you're maintaining those. Don't wait for the fire department to tell you to update those. They're fading. You want to make sure that you're taking care of that. Then also all electrical, mechanical, sprinkler, riser, water heaters, boiler. So all the utility rooms are properly identified. And this is something that would ideally be inside of the site plan, inside of the Knox cabinet. But also you want to make sure that, you know, if in case there's like a emergency, like a structure fire, you know, we know exactly where utilities are located so that we can shut them off or turn them off if we have to, depending on the emergency. Again, that is a requirement. That's not a recommendation. By the way, these are all requirements. Sprinkler, riser, and fire alarm control panels, roof access. So anything related to fire protection systems have to be properly labeled and identified. So all signage shall be red background, white letters at the doors so that we can properly identify them. So for instance, electrical and mechanical rooms, even though they're required to be identified and have proper signage, they don't have to meet a certain criteria or a certain color. You know, they could be any color you want as long as they're in contrast and we can identify them. Okay, but anything related to fire protection systems, they have to be red background, white letters. Okay, and then PIVs, post indicator valves, fire department connections shall be chained and have appropriate signage. The reason why we say chained is because the last thing you want is for someone to turn off your sprinkler water and during an emergency, your sprinkler system is not going to work properly. Okay. So let's talk about maintenance. If you have a sprinkler system in a commercial setting, there's 3 types of sprinkler systems. There's a 13, 13R, and a 13D. So a 13D is domestic. So those are installed for single family dwellings and duplexes. For a 13R is residential. You'll typically find those in B&Bs, hotels, motels, and the 13 system, and NFPA 13 is a commercial, so wineries, tasting room, restaurants, industrial. That's the difference between all 3. So with the exception of a 13D, 13Rs, all 13R and 13 systems are required to be inspected on an annual basis by a C16 contractor and on an annual basis. And in addition, a 5-year inspection report shall be issued. And these records shall be kept on site and be ready in case our office is looking for those, asks for those inspection records. Okay. The reason why I want to highlight this one is sometimes we're finding that during construction inspections, maybe you're making you're remodeling or making an addition to one of the buildings. Before we can sign off on your project, we're going to ask for those documents. And sometimes we're finding that some of these are probably haven't been inspected in over 5 or 6 years. So again, this shall be done on an annual basis, and make sure you keep proper records of them. There are proper forms for these types of inspections that I'll go over later, and I'll show you a blank copy. But we're not looking for invoices. There's actual documents that are required per California Fire Code. In addition to that, make sure that whoever is obtaining these documents is actually taking time to read what and take a look at the actual report. You can certainly call us or call me to see if there are any deficiencies. Good contractors should be going over these documents with you to make sure that there are no deficiencies found on your system. If there are, then that means that you have a failed inspection report. So if, we want to make sure, again, to ensure that, reduce liability for you as a property owner, we want to make sure that it's your responsibility to maintain, but also fix any deficiencies that are detailed in an inspection report. Okay. If in fact you have a inspection report that details any deficiencies, make sure that you have the proper repairs made. And after the proper repairs have been made, make sure that you obtain a second inspection report showing that no deficiencies were found. Let's see, a spare head box is required to be maintained in all commercial properties. So a spare box, basically it's a red box that has additional sprinkler heads in case of one of them being broken or being defective. They can be replaced, and they are required to be maintained at the location, at the property. All excussions and missing trims shall be replaced immediately. So that's another thing. One of the things that I highly recommend is, as property managers, just have a monthly inspection, internal inspection, where you walk the property or assign someone to do a couple things. Look at all your sprinkler heads. Just do a visual. Look at your sprinkler heads and make sure that there's no leakage. There's no paint over any of the sprinkler heads or any of the compartments. Like the excussion is the ring that goes around the sprinkler head. Same thing with the alarm system. It's not being blocked, or any of the pull stations are being obstructed by furniture or any device or any furniture. And so, obviously, if you do find something like that, you want to report it to whoever has jurisdiction over there, whether it be your fire alarm technician or your sprinkler contractor. Okay. And then if you have a fire pump, make sure that you're inspecting it and testing it, having the proper tests done by a qualified technician. I know that a lot of people have reached out about a fire pump. How can I do it myself? Instead of having a C16 contractor come out every week to do the churn test, what can we do? So there is a way that you can assign someone to actually do it in-house. That would help reduce the cost, but you have to go through a process. That person has to be certified through the state, has to go through certain classes through the state. And once they obtain a certain permit, then they would be able to do the churn test for you. Okay. If you have a fire alarm system, so if you have a sprinkler system, automatically you would have a fire alarm system. So all alarm systems are required to be maintained by a licensed C10 contractor. Again, it is the responsibility of the property owner to ensure that the reports submitted by the C10 contractor are the approved NFPA 72 reports. And then if you need a copy of a blank report or what that looks like, you can reach out to us, to our office, or you can go to our website at countyofnapa.com/fire marshal, and you will find all these forms there, including this this document. Again, all deficiencies and all violations that are found or detailed in the inspection report, they shall be repaired immediately. All fire alarm control panels are required to have an NFPA 25 sticker, so detailing the most recent annual alarm certification. So in addition to providing a copy of a copy of the inspection report, the alarm technician has a responsibility to ensure that they're putting a sticker on the actual fire alarm panel advising of when the last inspection was conducted. So let's talk about, not all of these properties meet this, but if you do have a kitchen suppression system, these are the guidelines. So all properties that are equipped with a kitchen suppression are required to be inspected semi-annually, so every 6 months by a qualified technician. So there's two things here. There's a pre-engineered kitchen suppression system, and there's a hood system. So while they're both meant to protect the cooking equipment, there's two separate things. So one extinguishes the fire, and the other one basically is the exhaust system that basically gets all the particles and all the grease, and so they are usually managed by two different companies. So for instance, a pre-engineered kitchen suppression system, you would have a qualified technician come out and basically make sure that the agent that is in the cylinders, because it's obviously not water, it's working properly, but also all the pipes, all the fittings, and the fusible links are working properly, so that in case the system gets to a certain temperature, because you have a fire now, a grease fire, once the cooking equipment gets to a certain temperature, then it's going to automatically activate. You have a pull station, again, that can also activate this system as well. And again, that's done every 6 months. There's an NFPA 25 document that's provided. In addition to that, now let's talk about the hood. The hood system is basically the exhaust system. So typically you would have a power wash company come out to the property, again, every 6 months, semi-annually. And they usually just get on the roof and start scraping and use solutions to properly clean any buildup in the plenum, and also they clean out all the filters. So one of the things that I'm finding is lots of times when I'm asking for these documents for when was the last time that your hood system was cleaned, I'm finding that some of these restaurants are telling me, well, we clean the filters every night, and so we're good. So just to make sure, the filters is just a component, a small component of the hood system. Typically, most fires occur in the plenum because of buildup and not being properly maintained. So that's something to look for as well. And at the end of that, there is no such report that has to be provided, but you do get an invoice, and the technician performing that does have the responsibility to put a sticker on the hood itself of when the last time they performed this, the cleaning of the hood. Okay. And that's the steam cleaning that we're talking about. So fire extinguishers, all commercial properties, fire extinguishers shall be serviced on an annual basis. And so they have a tag. There's two ways to do it. You can purchase new ones. If you are going to purchase one every year, make sure that before you buy it, you look at the proper date of manufacture. What I'm finding is lots of times people have a fire extinguisher that was manufactured in 2018 and hasn't been properly maintained. So before purchasing one, make sure you look at that date. Typically, you'll find it on the bottom of the fire extinguisher or on the actual tag. So make sure it's within the last year. So for now, we're 2021. I'm accepting 2020. If I see 2019, it would be a violation. A couple of things with fire extinguishers is in a commercial setting, typically, and not always, but typically, you're required to have a minimum rating of 2A10 BC fire extinguisher within 75 feet of travel distance from anywhere in the interior of the property. And so these fire extinguishers have to be properly mounted between 3 and 5 feet off the ground and shall be kept unobstructed. So again, no furniture or Christmas trees. For some reason, I find a lot of Christmas trees during the winter months that are, the Christmas trees are blocking the fire extinguisher. So try to keep 3 feet away from any obstructions, and make sure you have the proper signage and they can be identified. Okay. The only difference with this would be the commercial kitchens. All commercial kitchens that have a pre-engineered kitchen suppression system, they are required to have a Class K rated fire extinguisher within, it's 30 feet of travel distance from cooking equipment. It's not 20, it's 30 feet. Okay. And then again, the requirement also is they shall be maintained and inspected once a year by a qualified technician. Exit signs and emergency lighting. So there's, you can contract different companies to do this for you, but again, you can assign this internally. There's no requirement that a qualified technician has to come out and inspect these. The exit lights and signs, they typically have a kill switch or a button that you could just press. It basically just kills the power, and the battery backup basically will power and light up the signs itself. So what I would recommend is at least once a month have assign someone or someone different so they're familiar with the different locations of the fire extinguishers and also the exit signage, the exit signs, I'm sorry. And just to make sure, and keep a log of when you're doing it or who's doing it. Just for insurance purposes, it's always a good idea to have them just to make sure that, you know, especially during these power safety power shutoffs. Typically when, you know, PG&E will shut the power down to certain areas, that's where, unless you have a generator, that's where your battery backup will come into play. And sometimes we're finding that these exit signs are, the batteries being drained because this, they're meant for 24 hours of battery backup. And sometimes these power shutoff events are going beyond the 24 hours. So that's the purpose of doing a monthly inspection, internal inspection, and keeping a proper log. So a couple other things is they don't have to be hardwired. So they do make nuclear signs that meet the intent of the code. So you can before purchasing them, you can reach out to us and you can run it by our office and see if it meets the intent of the code, because they do make exit signs that are nuclear signs where they're not hardwired or they don't have a battery backup, and they are UL listed and they're good for 10 years. And so if you do happen to have one of those and you purchase it, make sure that you have the proper sticker or the proper documentation explaining the manufacture date. The reason for that is that if we do an inspection, let's say, again, we're looking at a remodel and we have to look at your exiting before we can sign off on the fire permit or a building permit, we're going to be looking at your means of egress, and that could be something that could prevent you from obtaining a final signature. Okay. And private fire hydrants. So all private hydrants shall be inspected annually. If you do have a private hydrant, make sure you reach out to a C16 contractor. Majority of the times that I'm finding is if you have a sprinkler system, then it wouldn't be a bad idea to have your same contractor that's servicing your sprinkler system service your hydrants as well. They shall be painted accordingly. They're different, so different municipalities have different requirements, but for the county, the requirement is that if it's a fire hydrant, it shall be painted yellow, and the calves shall be painted depending on what type of pressure you have. So if you need help with that, I would suggest reach out to your C16 contractor, and they can tell you what pressure you have, and they can tell you what color the cap shall be painted. That helps us so as to, if we come onto the property and we look at your hydrant, by looking at the the color of your caps, we automatically know how much pressure we can get out of that hydrant, because they all vary and depending on location as well. Okay, and then a proper inspection report is also required for these, for the hydrants. The other thing is, if you're gonna do a monthly, and I know some properties do this, where they do a monthly check on their hydrants, make sure that when you're tightening or closing your putting on the caps, make sure that you're not putting them so tight as to where it's gonna delay our operation. It's gonna take long for us to be able to open those hydrants. Make sure that you keep clearance 3 feet around the hydrants as well. Again, it's very important that you don't have any vegetation around there and they're not hiding or tucked away to a point where, you know, let's say it's 2 in the morning, we have a structure fire and we need to tap into those hydrants. It's not something we're going to be scattering and looking for the hydrants. And if you do have a private hydrant or a wet draft, we want to make sure that you have the blue reflective markers on the street adjacent to the actual hydrant or the water source. As the idea is that as we're pulling up to the property, if we're driving on the main road, we can identify that blue dot. It automatically alerts us that we have access to some sort of water connection. Okay. Electrical extension cords are not to be used as substitute for permanent wiring. So we have surge protectors. They have a built-in fuse so that in case you overload them, the fuse will shut off power. So make sure that you stay away from extension cords and supplement that with the surge protectors. Now, if you need something in a permanent nature, then make sure that you have you obtain the proper building permit for that. All electrical outlets shall have an outlet cover, and then all electrical panels shall remain unobstructed. That's a big one, and the reason for that is we know that a lot of businesses have very small space for storage, and sometimes I'm finding that it's very difficult for us to be able to get into those electrical rooms, or even fire pump rooms, or we're finding that we have tons of boxes right in front of the riser for the sprinkler system. So make sure that you're providing a clear separation. So 2 things. There is a code section in the California Fire Code that states that you shall provide a minimum of 3 feet around clearance around the actual electrical panel. But if it's inside of a room where it's not the main panel, but if it's inside a room, there is another code section that states that there shall be no combustible storage in any electrical, mechanical, fire pump, or riser room. So let's stay away from that. Let's make sure that we have adequate access to these utilities. And then all dedicated exits, egress corridors, and egress paths shall remain unobstructed at all times. So, for instance, if your means of egress is through a corridor or a hallway, make sure that you don't have any storage, which includes boxes, tables, any type of furniture. We want to make sure that, in an emergency, the idea is to be able to evacuate everybody. And we don't want, boxes of wine stacked 6 foot high, and that potentially they can come down and prevent people from exiting a building. Okay, and then all fire rated doors. So if you have a fire rated door, then it shall be maintained. So on the actual side of the door, you'll have a plate that tells you what the requirements are for that particular door. Lots of times I'm finding that people are actually either removing these or someone is painting over these plates. So make sure that if you are going to paint, make sure that the painter or whoever's going to be performing the work either covers them or removes them. And once the work is performed, then they put the actual plate back so that during an inspection, we can make sure that all the components that are detailed for that particular door are on there. Okay. Flammable liquids shall be stored inside non-flammable cabinets. With, if you have flammable liquids, then we require obviously SDS sheets, and typically we will find those in the NOx cabinet. Then oily rags shall be stored inside non-flammable containers. So typically you'll have the yellow ones. And if you have questions, you can reach out to us, and we can tell you whether it's right or wrong with what you have. Okay, occupancy signs shall be posted. So any A occupancy. So if you have an assembly occupancy, which is basically 50 or more, you're required to have a max occupancy sign or occupant load sign. The idea is as soon as anybody walks in, we can properly identify and know how many people can be in that particular room. And then same thing with fire curtains, shall be inspected once a year by a qualified technician. Elevators, records of OSHPD are required to be maintained. And again, the whole idea is all these documents, you're going to put them in a binder, and they're going to be inside this this binder, so that in case we have questions or insurance companies want to look at the records, they're available, and you don't have to be making phone calls in the middle of the night trying to find out where these documents are located. Propane tanks shall be stored in accordance with NFPA 58 requirements. So it varies on the size. In the county, we deal with a lot of above ground, underground, and portable propane tanks. So that's why I put in NFPA 58, which regulates propane tanks. All fire resistive penetration shall be repaired. So basically, if you any holes in the walls or any missing tiles in the ceiling are they shall be replaced, or any holes shall be patched and maintained. The whole purpose is we like to use the terminology compartmentalize. So we want to reduce the spread of fire. So one of the ways to do it is you want to maintain the integrity of all the walls. So if you have a fire in, let's say, office A, one of the ways to maintain the fire there is by making sure that you have no holes or no openings to the ceilings, as to it tends to spread. Storage shall be maintained 2 feet or more below the ceiling in non-sprinklered areas on buildings. So if you have an office or any commercial building that has no sprinkler system, you're required to have a minimum distance from the ceiling 2 feet or less. I'm sorry, 2 feet or more. So you want that open separation. Now, if you do have a sprinkler system, it's going to be less. But the idea is now the whole purpose of the sprinkler system is that not only is it going to wet the walls, but also it's not going to have any obstructions that could potentially extinguish a fire in that particular room. So all drapes, hangings, curtains, and other decorative material, including Christmas trees that can increase fire and panic hazard, shall be made from a non-flammable material. So if you're not sure about this, let us know. But typically, if you're going to install drapes in a property in a commercial setting, you want to make sure that you're getting the proper one. And the best way to look at it is, and to know and identify them, is by looking at the tags. The tags typically have the listing for the State Fire Marshal's office. And so if they have it, then that means that it's approved. And then typically it'll give you an actual number. If you're not sure, you can reach out to us and we can assist you with that as well. Okay. And again, this is not all inclusive. We deal with various codes and also NFPA standards, but basically this is the meat and potatoes of how to maintain your property in conjunction with NFPA standards and California fire codes. The last thing we want is, we're coming out to do any type of inspection, whether it be a construction inspection or because someone filed a complaint. If we've received a complaint from whether it be an employee or a guest, we have the obligation to follow up on the nature of the complaint. And so that means that would trigger an inspection. Even though you're not under the category of an annual inspection by the fire department, there's times when we can, if we identify an area that's could potentially be a hazard, or if we receive a complaint. All right, and that's what I have. So I know that, let me see here. All right, perfect. So does anybody have any questions? Okay, let's see. I see a couple of things here in the bottom. Okay, and Dempsey, all right. What
I
I'll
put
do
a
is
few links in.
perfect, perfect. And then also what I'm gonna do here, let me change the screen here real quick. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna provide our phone number. Let's see, how do I, oh, here we go. And then I'm gonna put our phone number to our office. Okay. And then I'll also write in the link to our fire marshal's website. Okay. So does anybody have any questions? So one thing I do want to touch on is this, you know, as the defensible space inspector, that's one of my many tasks that I have. And so the reason why that I'm touching a lot on defensible space and is for several reasons, but one of them, what I'm finding recently is there's a lot of companies out there that are coming out and basically you're reaching out to them and saying, I need an evaluation, I need quotes on how to provide adequate defensible space to my property. And so what I'm finding is some of these companies are coming out and either they're not familiar with the Napa County specific defensible space, or they're basically just throwing quotes out there that have potentially no effect on defensible space. So again, if you're not sure, you can reach out to me. While I can't tell you anything about, you know, numbers, whether it's expensive or not, I won't be able to touch on that. I cannot make recommendations, but I can tell you if the work that is proposed could potentially meet the defensible space requirements per the ordinance and our guidelines in the county. So I see a question here. Give me 1 second. So the question is, any thoughts about a floating pool pump with 2.5-inch national hose thread outlet for personal fire defense? So here's what I can tell you. You know, there's a lot of stuff that, you know, people are doing. You know, again, it's similar to it's similar to installing a water tank, right? I'm sorry, water tenders or even water tanks. The problem with that is under mandatory evacuations, what we're advising or we're telling the public is to, if you're under mandatory evacuations, please evacuate. So just keep that in mind. The last thing that we want is you're gonna go out and spend money on stuff like this where potentially you're under mandatory evacuations, and now because of, you know, you have this equipment, you could potentially put yourself at risk or first responders. So, you know, just keep that in mind. Now, if you have something that you want us to use, just reach out to me. I provided my information. I kind of want to look at it and I can tell you whether or not it'll work for our operations. Not all the times that's the case, but you know, one of the things is there's a common analogy out there that, you know, I have a pool, you're going to use it. Well, it's not necessarily true. If you have a pool, it depends on the distance from the pool to where our engine is parked. So there's a lot of stuff that comes into play. So that for this particular question, is this something that I would have no issue meeting with you if you reach out to me directly and actually walking your property and seeing what your proposal is? Because while I'm not saying no to if we're going to use it, you know, again, any water source that we can plug into that we can use, it's great with the proper fittings, but I just want to look at the location of it. For instance, the wet drafts. The wet drafts are required to be a minimum of 40 feet away from the structure, but not further than 150 feet. The reason for that is we don't want them to be so close to a structure that's on fire but at the same time, that could potentially, put the engine or the first responders at risk. But at the same time, it's not far enough away where we can still reach to the back of the property or the structure. Okay, that's a really good question though. Okay, let's see here. Let's see. Okay, you may want to.
Hey, Eric, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I think we'll launch our survey or our poll, just so
Perfect.
that way we can have that coming in as well.
Sure, I do have another one actually. So again, they need to have host threading the irrigation tanks. That's a good question. So irrigation tanks, I've seen a little bit of everything. We have irrigation tanks, different areas where we can potentially tap into. The easiest way and what I recommend is if you have a proposal, the best thing you can do is reach out to us before you go out and spend money, and we can tell you whether or not it would meet or whether it would you can benefit from it or we can benefit from it. So there's certain like a 4.5 inch to 2.5 inch would work on a wet draft. That's not necessarily something that's going to work on an actual hydrant or even a warp hydrant. So it all depends on what kind of water resource and the location of the actual the device is located. So that's a really good question. The best answer that I can give is reach out to us before. If you have an idea, we want to hear it. We want to hear about it, and we can tell you whether or not we can do something with it before you go out and spend the money.
Well, thank you so much. If we don't have any further questions, Eric, thank you so much for your time. As I stated before at the beginning of this, we're updating our wildfire section of our website too, using many of the resources that Eric's provided throughout this presentation. So we will share that information with you and more as it gets developed. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for filling out the poll, and we will see you all soon.